So I begin with last session. In the last session, I finished with the first attitude towards the mathematical object, which was the attitude of taking it to be a child of truth, derived from truth. And then I moved last time to the second attitude, which is taking the object to have been presented to us. And so my way of commenting that is to say that the object in that case has been politely introduced. Then I explained a bit more how I understand this presentation approach, connecting it with the issue of subjectivity. And then I considered the first case of presentation of a mathematical object, which is the case of the constructive object. So I explain how we introduce at once a class of constructive objects through a recursive clause. And then I discussed Brouwer's conception of constructive objectivity. In that discussion, I came to the conclusion that for constructive objects, it doesn't make really an important difference between inhabiting mental space, which was Brouwer's vision, and inhabiting discursive space, because we may also recount with words the construction of an object, and finally being written down in the symbolic space. I think that's the strength of constructive objects, is that they are the same at these three levels. So then
just real quick, do you mind interruptions for comments, or do you want to wait for questions?
No, go on.
You may know about this, but with regard to that last paragraph, Brouwer, I think, famously might not have agreed with you. He has this passage where he thinks that like different mathematicians could prove, like legitimately carry out different incompatible mental constructions, and he says something really poetic about it, like it would be like two world-class musicians play together. So there's just a little historical. I'm not saying that paragraph's wrong, but like it's a little historical note about Brouwer.
No, I have that in mind. Okay. In the last session, I underlined the fact that he, in a way, he was solipsist. In collective mind.
Hiding in some later guys, not so much.
There is a famous argument against the very idea of a collective mind.
Okay. So I just wanted okay.
So then I tried to describe what we call intuition of a constructive object. And I think it has to be understood as intuition of a structure, which may be either directly the intuition of a tree structure, because it's the tree structure witnessing the correct construction of the object, or it could be intuition of the tree structure underlying linear symbolic expression. Because in usual cases, we have a unique reading lemma, which makes it sure that we have only one tree behind a written expression. So then I asked the question, I said that the constructive object has been presented to us, but one could say that we are the agent of the construction. So I asked whether the constructive object is our presentation, or is it, can I see ways of understanding this presentation as an encounter? So I also discussed the finiteness condition on constructions, because we usually understand constructions as anything which has been built inside the recursive clause in a finite way, using finite source objects and applying finitely many rules. And then I said something more, and so after discussing this finiteness issue, I said a bit more about our acknowledgement that something is a regular construction. And I think the best way to see it is to understand it as a kind of schematic recognition. Because at once we see, so to say, that the tree express a correct derivation of the object. Expresses, sorry. So now a last point about constructive objectivity, which is that I think that at the level of the constructive object, the famous Benacerraf's dilemma in a way vanishes. I want to explain that a bit more. So first, I remind you Benacerraf's discussion, although I already expounded it. He says that mathematical truth, if we want to account classically of mathematical truth by positing objects, which about with in relation to which we verify the statement, in that case, the object has to stand beyond any perception. It has to be abstract. So it's clear for Benacerraf, and for Benacerraf, if the object is abstract, then we don't understand really how we manage to know the object and to determine it. So even in his seminal paper, which is called Mathematical Truth, as Marco reminded us, he asks for a naturalist explanation of this relation of us to the abstract object. We should understand a good epistemology should account for the causal action of abstract objects on us. I think that when Benacerraf addresses the issue in that way, he sticks to the approach which has been the approach of modern philosophy. Because in modern philosophy, when we study knowledge, we study it on the basis of our spontaneous ideas, that's the name in Locke, or phenomena, that's the name in Kant or in Husserl, for example, of external things. And the task for philosophy is to understand common unscientific knowledge on the basis of these data, phenomena or ideas. And how I understand post-Fregean epistemology, this approach is considered as closed and finished. Now, we don't have to understand knowledge starting from ideas or phenomena. We have moved towards a linguistic stance, which means that our original figure of the knowing subject is not anymore the figure of a perceptive subject, but rather the figure of a linguistic agent. So now our issue, if we take up Benacerraf's dilemma, is to understand how knowledge is possible of mathematical object, as elaborated, this knowledge, in the linguistic framework. So I think we understand very easily how mathematical language covers constructive mathematical object, at least at the simplest level, because our formal language, because we are working inside formal languages, and our formal language is able to replicate constructive objectivity. Because it replicates it, it's able to correspond to it as truth, as the notion of truth requires it. I come back to Kant's famous example of 7 plus 5 equal 12. And Kant, as you know, says that this statement is not analytic because, according to him, there is no way to extract from the concept of 12, to extract the concept of 12 from the concepts of 7, 5, and their addition. So in his account, 7 plus 5 equal 12 is still a valid synthetic a priori statement, because we are able to intuitively project the identity of 12 with 7 plus 5. We elaborate in the intuitive dimension the gathering of 7 and 5. That's simply what we do. So then if I come back to a possible contemporary approach of that, what would be our language for asserting 7 plus 5 equal 12? I think, and this is considered as a statement about natural numbers. So we can use hating arithmetic, which in that case behaves exactly like piano arithmetic. And so we can give a formal proof of 7 plus 5 equal 12, which because 7 plus 5 equal 12 happens to be SSSSSSS0 plus SSSSS0 equal, and it's too long for me to say a lot of S0, and we simply use 5 times the axiom x plus sy equal S of x plus y. And in that way, we make the code for 12 arise from the addition of 7 and 5. We just have to write all the equalities which I showed here on the slide. And this computation happens at the level of our formal language. And it doesn't differ very much from what Kant was describing as gathering 7 and 5 and recognizing 12.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So what's now the conclusion from this in terms of this distinction, analytic and synthetic?
In terms of?
Yeah, is this analytic or synthetic reasoning?
Well, I think a lot of people are commenting that by saying now we have a formal proof. Hence, it's analytic.
Yes, yeah,
people
exactly.
say
that. Was my reaction.
Yes, but I think if you look at the way the proof works, the formal proof works, it's the same synthetic gesture. So
super picky.
But isn't it like, I mean, the equation you have there,
yeah,
the equal sign there, x plus s, that's the definition of the plus. So all I'm doing in that proof is I'm applying the definitions, so it's analytic.
If you want it to be analytic, I don't take.
No, but I'm trying to understand, like, kind of how I can switch my mind, right, to view it as synthetic, but I don't manage to do that.
Well, it's not necessarily the definition, maybe in piano, and sometimes he defines addition in that way, but in the classical exposition now, it's one of the actions which are satisfied.
I would see it as the definition of plus, because like otherwise, how do you know what plus is?
No, I understand you. I'm okay with any way of feeling it, but I'm just saying that in the contemporary exposition, usually you are not making a special case of this axiom. You have a lot of axioms. You have, for example, Sx equal Sy.
Okay,
it entails X equal Y.
But then does the distinction between synthetic and analytic hinges on whether you read this as an axiom or a definition?
I think if you look at the proof realizes exactly what Kant described as the synthetic gathering of 7, 5, yielding 12. And then you may comment that in any way, but I was just describing what happens.
Mm-hmm. Yes. My picky technical point is now not slightly so picky because it's a little bit relevant to that. Insofar as that proof doesn't just use that axiom, but you also need the commutativity axiom, because that axiom only allows you to strip the s's off the right-hand side.
I think here I don't use the commutativity.
You do, because you pull the s's off the left-hand side one as well.
No.
Or wait.
No.
I don't see it. But,
no, I don't think it's commutative.
Oh no, you just get to use the zero axiom. Okay, you need the zero axiom.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what
you need. I need the zero axiom.
Sorry, I was imagining a different proof. I didn't read through the proof very carefully, because you could have just pulled them all out to the outside, but then you would use commutativity on the inside. But this is a different proof. So that means that single axiom up there can't be a definition, because to run you got to have
you need at least two axioms. You're right.
X plus 0 is X. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm computer science as much as the math, so this is why I read this as a definition, because that's how we program.
Yes.
I understand that. Yes.
Yeah.
And I've seen texts in which it is taken as the definition of what's there. So after all, formal language is of the same species as constructive mathematical object. That's why it may mirror it. Because terms, formulas, or proofs are defined as finite constructive objects. We have a recursive clause explaining what terms are, a recursive clause explaining what formulas are, a recursive clause explaining what proofs are. And for a constructively minded philosopher, natural numbers are also of that kind. You can define natural numbers with one chosen symbol, and you have the building rule allowing to always add one new symbol on the right. Or you can also use names in the formal language. You can use 0 and S0 and SS0 and so on. So our formal proof reproduces the construction in time of 12 as 7 plus 5 inside formal language. It's not mysterious that our language has access to mathematical objectivity because they are both of the same kind and they are able to mirror one each other. So this narrative doesn't account for constructive truth in general, because in constructive arithmetic, for example, we prove a lot more than 7 plus 5 equal 12. And even if you consider the very simple example of the sum of the first n natural numbers, that it is n multiplied by n plus 1 divided by 2, you are already beyond mirroring. And as a matter of fact, I know 3 proofs of that, and each of the 3 proofs uses a vision of the scheme of an arbitrary construction of a natural number. You know, either you are writing 1, 2 until n, and then n in the reverse sense, and then you are looking at the additions, or you look at the sum of the first n natural numbers as included in a square, and you are using your knowledge of the surface of the square. Or you are directly using reasoning by recurrence. So in each case, you are using the synthetic general vision of an arbitrary construction, which is something more than mirroring. So I think we would need a finer description of how constructive theoretical truth manages to master complexity by using other means. For example, seeing the arbitrary general natural number. But we understand, at least at the basic level, how constructive truth is possible. It simply proceeds from the ability of constructive mathematical object to be mirrored by constructive linguistic machinery. So here's truth is classical, its correspondence by mimicry. So in that sense, Benacera's dilemma vanishes for fundamental reasons. First, it's because our knowing subject is not the perceptual subject, but it's the linguistic agent. And second, it's because we recognize the same machinery on both sides, on the side of language and on the side of the object.
Can I ask again, just like when you say grasps synthetically numbers as arbitrary constructors?
Yeah.
So why?
I see.
Why the word synthetically in this sentence? Like what's?
We are using a kind of vision of time when we see the general n as arising from one, as at the end of the sequence from 1 to n.
So okay.
Then I have a question.
Yeah.
I expect you're going to address it later, but I'm going to ask it now. I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay.
Can one think that we are actually managing not just numbers, but functions of numbers? and the identity which was written on the previous slide was an identity of functions written in a way that looks.
So I think considering functions raises a lot of difficulties.
Okay.
So for that moment, I'm not entering that. I agree with you. We are tempted to introduce functions because they are in our world. And I think I had a discussion with Alex last time, I think. But, as I understand it, now that we have the Turing thesis, we have a way of considering recursive functions. We have three programming languages to present them in a way, and we have an argument which shows that it's the same. But then each of them. So if we look at the recursive functions as defined by a lambda term, then this lambda term is a constructive object because we have a recursive clause defining in general lambda terms. And also, if you look at this function like Gödel did as a function from a list of natural numbers to natural numbers, also we have a derivation, a tree derivation of the function out of the basic simplest function, projection, constant, and successor. So we have each time a constructive identification of the function. And also if you have a Turing table, you can consider that also as a constructive identification of the function. But still, for me, there is a difficulty, which is that any recursive functions is a kind of black box, providing an output for an arbitrary input. So in that sense, in every notion of function, there is infinity, because we have an infinite range of possible actions of this function. So that's why, for me, even if we identify the function in a constructive way, like we do with recursive functions, there is still something which is not constructive, which is behind the very notion of function. So now my last section of this first part was infinity and continuum, because then one could ask, we have foundational considerations which give a very good picture of constructive mathematics and constructive knowledge, but we would like a mathematics able to speak about infinity and about continuum. And we know that Cantor's paradise, the world that Cantor gave to us, is extremely appropriate to do both. It gives us a hierarchy of the infinite, and also in Cantor's set theory, we are able to build a very good theoretical object, fulfilling all traditional expectations concerning the continuum. And I mean R, as you know. So it's a classical argument against constructive approach. Are we okay with losing all these advantages? Probably not. And you know that technically this issue has been explored already by Brouwer himself, who tried to build a theory of the continuum in his own terms, and even more by people having worked after, like Bishop and Bridges. I'm not going to readdress this topic. Anyway, I think that we need to keep that theoretical framework. Will it only be because it's the most official framework? Kind of sociological remark. Everybody speaks that language. Set theory is a kind of koine or lingua franca of mathematicians today. So I would rather ask the question, I don't consider the possibility of staying within the constructive realm. I would rather ask the question, can we consider sets as having been presented? So that will be my question. Sorry, I'm quick. So that's my second part, which I call correlative objectivity. I'm going to explain that language. So I'm beginning with sets. So how do we get acquainted with sets? I think there are two possible answers. The first one is that we can say that we have a Cantorian intuition. We understand the shared conception of collection. So we understand collection, we understand membership. You remember when Paul Levy was giving his talk, he was speaking about this intuition. We have an intuition of sets, and what he means is that we have the understanding of collection and membership. I think what he calls intuition here is the same as a clear representation of collection and membership. That's the first level. And also, we know that we can add to this shared intuition of collection and membership. We can add Venn diagrams. And in that way, sets appear as a kind of potato bags. That's a famous French mathematician, René Thom, used that expression.
Why potatoes?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, he used, say, dust bags, sac à poussière. But anyway, I think we all see it immediately. And with Venn diagrams, we are able to represent intersections and overlapping of sets. And there is another part, which is sets are also mysteriously introduced at once by the mere stipulation of the axioms of formal set theory. Someone reads the text of ZFC, starting with the empty set axiom. He or she goes until the replacement axiom scheme. And after such ceremonies, sets are available, and we begin the game of working with sets. I think it's exactly how it appears in Yer's famous treatise. So, does it mean that we consider a ZFC universe as a fiction? Because it would be presented by the text of ZFC's axioms. That's a way of asking the question. Another way of asking the question is to ask whether Cantorian intuition of sets and sets configurations survives formalization. And I think that for many philosophers, if you read them, you have the feeling that sets are either intuitive or formalized, but they cannot be both. In their narrative, we first thought we shared a sufficient intuition of sets, but then contradictions emerged. And for that reason, we had to formalize, and now we have no intuition. And people who think that we have no intuition because formalization happened, they think like a mathematician friend who died at the beginning of COVID used to say, it was an enlightening joke. He said, there are no sets in set theory. If you think that nothing is presented by the very uttering of ZFC's axiom, then there are no sets in set theory. That's what is often called as the strict formalist position. I think working mathematicians would rather say that sets are both intuitive and formalized. Because actions of ZFC allow us to recover Cantorian intuition. Most of ZFC's axioms are just formulated in order to make Cantorian intuition valid. Only separation scheme and or, because one replacement scheme are meant to prevent paradoxes. So ZFC's stipulation does not kill intuition. It rather tells us how to be cautious with the same intuition. Yeah.
I don't know if you're going to bring it up, but I do remember Cantor commenting on the correct introduction of a set in what he wrote. And he declared that there were two requests for giving a set. Are you going to, I mean, because the first thing is that from within the universe of discourse, something like this, we have to have a way to understand precisely what it means to be a member or not of the given set. And together with that, once we understand membership, we also have to understand when two elements within the set are going to be deemed. In other words, in a sense, I see the point of there are no sets in ZFC, also because the second part of the intuition is lost in ZFC. Sets are at the first layer where we understand membership. Then the equality doesn't come into the axiomatization. Rather, there is extensional equality. I mean, there is the extensionality axiom, which kills the possibility of identifying things.
Yeah, I think this declaration of Cantor shows very well how his intuition is not the same thing as formalization. But still, I rather insist on the fact that living within the formalization, you keep Cantorian intuition. Yeah, but I agree with you that you could have problems with identity, and that's a very big issue. One could say that homotype theory comes back on that, and I have in my third approach of the mathematical object, my third attitude would be the attitude focusing on the identity conditions between objects and forgetting about the origin of objects.
But just Congress is saying this because you talked about foundation axioms. I think in terms of like it gives us extensionality and so equality of sets. But there's also a set theory based on anti-foundation. And it's also interesting. Then equality becomes something like bisimulation.
Like?
Bisimulation.
Okay.
So foundation means two sets are equal, they have the same elements. In anti-foundation, you take the opposite approach. Instead of building elements, you use building sets, you use elements, the element relation to observe sets. Okay, right? But these chains of observations can be infinite.
Yeah, I understand that.
So about like the axles stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're right that this issue of keeping the notion of identity, a clear notion of identity, is connected with the foundation action. I agree with that. I wanted to go a bit more in the direction of Pino, because I remember that when I was asking undergraduate students questions, I tried to give them as an exercise the definition of ordinals and the recognition of finite ordinals. And having to understand that the membership relation was giving a structure of co-set to an arbitrary set, it was very difficult for them because they were used to have sets which were sets of things, of already given things. And in that case, you have to understand that formalization means that it's not the case. Everything is a set, is a synonym of mathematical objects. So I think it was very striking that you have difficulties. Okay.
I wanted to say quick couple things about these ideas about intuition. One is, the claim that ZFC stipulation does not kill intuition. And I've written a little bit about this. Like, I think our intuitive, like Venn diagram level of intuitions about sets, there are like two principles that seem obvious and central to that intuition. One is the one corresponding to separation, right? So we think of sheep, right? If you've built a fence around the sheep, so you've turned it into the set, which is the flock of sheep, you can always separate the white sheep and the black sheep and have the white sheep, right? Or any other division you want. That's the axiom of separation, right? But the other intuition is that in the relevant sense of this metaphor, fences don't have privileged sides, right? So if you've fenced in the sheep, you've also fenced in all the non-sheep, right? Just think about the fence in the other direction, which is the axiom of complement, right? And with the level of intuitive, like we're teaching kids just naive set theory and ignoring the paradoxes and using Venn diagrams and stuff like that. Venn diagrams have complement, right? And it seems to me that that's as strong a part of our intuitive conception of pre-theoretic, pre-paradox conception of set. But in fact, separation and complement, you don't even need full unrestricted comprehension. Separation and complement, plus the claim that there's at least one non-empty set or just one set, is enough to get you the contradiction, right? So ZFC kills, like, at least of the things I think of as our really raw basic intuitions about sets, ZFC kills half of them, right? And going with separation versus complement seems to me, I've looked at the history some, to be relatively arbitrary. I mean, there are set theories out there that have that look like a copy of ZFC and then an upside down copy of ZFC. And Thomas Forster has worked on these a lot. Church worked on them way back in the day. And they have the axiom of complement, but don't have full separation, right? And they're attempt to get the other side of this intuition. The second thing I wanted to worry, and it's just sort of data to worry about some of these claims or to think about. The ZFC axioms, I mean, the idea that they're intuitive to working mathematicians, I think horrifically corrupted by theory there, and they've just been working with ZFC models enough or even intuitively that they think it's intuitive. Because historically, and this goes back to Cantor and also Zermelo, they're like these, and in the literature today, there's like these two sort of kinds of attempts to provide an intuitive formal story about what sets are and why they're structured the way they are. And one is starts with Cantor's notion of limitation of size, right? The sets of the collections that aren't too big. And then the other is Zermelo's, which is the sets of the things you can sort of constructively build one by one in the big V hierarchy. You don't get all of ZFC on either of those conceptions, right? Power set does not follow, at least not particularly straightforwardly, on the sets are not too big, right? Because it's not really, I mean, given how powerful the power set operator is and the continuum hypothesis and all the worries about that, it's not obvious that even if a set is not too big, that its power set is not too big, or at least not obvious to a lot of people. If you go to the iterative conception, power set's fine, it's just the next level, but then replacement looks fishy because replacement can take you from a level, like some stuff at a level to stuff way higher, right, in the hierarchy. That's not sort of guaranteed that the hierarchy, I mean, intuitively, you might not think that it's guaranteed that the hierarchy goes that high. So I've sort of become convinced personally that there isn't a unified intuition at all behind ZFC. It's just sort of this ad hoc basket of principles that we think probably and really hope are consistent and are what we need to do the math we want to do. I mean, I'd be wrong about that, but I just wanted to throw that all out there because this slide sort of made me think about.
Discussion. You are trying to look at all the axioms and to elaborate more on the intuitive counterpart behind them. And so you are insisting in the beginning that we only need to have the separation axiom. We may engender the contradictions very quickly. So I agree with that, but I think that even if such study is possible, there is a more basic shared sense in which we still have Cantorian intuition. Yes,
I'm sorry, but I like very much the comment. May I add two things to it?
Yeah.
One is that I'm not so sure. I share your doubt that not all mathematicians are aware of ZFCs, all axioms, in particular replacement.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right, it goes
crazy powerful
out of the range. But then again, the intuition, like for the natural numbers, comes from say the world around us, and there all the axioms but the axiom of infinity are true, because in finite sets even the axiom of choice holds. And I'm afraid that yes, the intuition is mainly via Venn diagrams, is mainly based on that, which is correct. then again, it's a nice intuition.
I agree with you that in order to have this discussion in a more accurate way and profound way, we should include constructive objectivity in what we call intuition. So, and that's the idea, because the axiom of infinity exactly says that we may include in any universe, the ZFC universe, every possible constructive objectivity. So, okay, with all these remarks which enrich the whole thinking of that, I would simply say that if you are if you believe that there are sets, that sets are presented by the stipulation of ZFC, then what you think is that there is a kind of intentional move in the sense of Husserl, which is determined by the very stipulation of ZFC's axioms. It is enough to have heard or read the text of these axioms for projecting a corresponding world. And I think that's the way we, at a very simple level, we experience when we read the Yech's treatise, we feel that way. So it means that we spontaneously relate to a multiplicity satisfying the axioms. That's the idea. But such multiplicity cannot be interpreted as a model because it's too big. It's supposed to be the multiplicity of all sets. In order to define the Tarskian notion of model, on the contrary, you need in the first place to have a universe of sets. So the picture here is a kind of a metaphysical miracle. It's enough to have uttered the axioms or to have written them down for having, in a mysterious way, immediately what I call a correlative world. Correlative, it means that it's only there as correlated to the text of the ZFC stipulation. And it's true that the adjective correlative is also used in many ways by Husserl, and there is a reminder of that in my terminology. So we know some examples of this presentation by correlation, presentation of what I call correlative objectivity. For example, that's the way sets are presented to us, but we may also see natural numbers in that way. And for example, someone may think that natural numbers are presented by PA, by formal arithmetic. Or you may also consider that categories with their rows, aroused and objects are presented by a good first order theory of categories. So we think that not only that this correlative world is presented by the stipulation of the axioms, but we also feel that we see a universe of sets. And we know that after a bit of work, we are able to picture the universe of sets as the cone of the hierarchy of ranks. So as we are used to behave in these situations, we know that there is a kind of transcendental rule for knowing sets. We can only know set by proving theorems inside ZFC system. So this looks like a special case of the general rule of Husserl, which I expounded last time, which is that knowledge of any particular region object cannot be known beyond their presentation mode. If you know how objects of a certain region are presented, then you know how you are going to be able to know them. That's what Husserl considers as the transcendental value of a canonical presentation mode. Canonical presentation mode mode dictates how I come to have knowledge about corresponding objects. In Husserl's conception, this would be simply understanding in a better way the notion of object presentation, because the argument would be if objects of a certain kind are met in such and such manner, I cannot know them if I don't come back to their encounter protocol. Because if I don't do that, I cannot claim that my knowledge is the knowledge of these objects.
Can you go back to the previous slide real quick? I just want to read something. Okay, I just want to clarify, this is purely an epistemological claim, or is there like a metaphysical ontological claim here? Because I mean, there's this crazy claim that I believe, but most people think we're crazy, like contemporary, like recent work on neologism. So like the Crispin Wright, Bob Hale, Oistlin, William Nabo, myself, where we lay down these abstraction principles for various mathematical theories. We think not only what you just said and attributed to Husserl, we also think the objects themselves exist because of a what you were calling a presentation protocol. Basically, we think if the theory that you lay down has such and such nice properties, the objects exist because of the theory.
That was my first attitude.
Okay.
Objects as children of truth.
Yeah. Okay.
You should. I started with a big quotation of Bob Hale.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Yeah. Okay. This is all the stuff I missed. Okay.
I think it's completely different in that case.
Okay.
You have a metaphysical claim, and you try to derive this metaphysical claim from a good understanding of the Hume principle.
Yeah.
But then you have a lot of difficulties.
Well, I don't think so, but I have a different version than Bob. So Bob is a very, very good friend of mine. So and I learned a lot of this stuff from him back in the day. But,
I know even the people who are making that claim, they consider a lot of objections.
Yeah.
But
anyway, I have my own twist on it that is because of those objections.
No, I believe you have a very good conception of all that, but then what is very clear is here I am describing a completely different story.
Yeah, so this is more, so that slide is just, at least the slide we were on was just epistemology, right? There's no like ontological, metaphysical stuff.
Epistemology is too much to say. I have the feeling I just described how we are living with ZFC and how we understand.
But epistemology, I just meant it was a claim about how we come to know about the ZFC objects. I didn't mean anything sort of heavy-handed.
Well, it's not only about knowledge, because what I declare is that when we read Yer's book, we have the feeling that after having listened to the ZFC axioms, we see the universe of sets.
Okay.
And even then it comes to be more determined, because when we understand what the cone is, but it's an elaboration of a first admitted perspective.
Yeah, okay.
So a bit more about Husserl. For Husserl, this conception that we come to know, we are able to know objects only by referring to their presentation protocol. It has several applications. For example, he considers the case of external usual perceptive objects, like the tree in the garden in his example. And he says that we know these objects on the basis of their noetic profile. That's what is explained in paragraph 85 of first the idea in the book. And for example, if we are knowing other persons, he says that we know them on the basis of their presentation, and their presentation is through Einfühlung, as he describes it. And we know temporal objects on the basis of our original relation to duration, which is given by the famous retentional diagram of Husserl.
I don't know this phrase, poetic Or
Yeah.
So can you
No,
expand?
I spoke about it in previous seminars.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. But I kind of.
Noema is the object as intended, as aimed at, not an existing object.
So this dash between noetic and noematic separates, it connects two different concepts, or is
No,
the same idea?
Noema in Greek is what is thought, is the object of thought.
Okay.
And noetic it's built on noesis, which is the act of thinking. So, and Husserl, he always insists that when we say, for example, that the tree is green, it's a way of taking into account all our Abschattungen of the tree, and we recognize the component of the color green in every Abschattung. And so in a way, we are gathering the green content of the Abschattungen, and we are attributing the green color to the tree. And it's a synthesis, and it's a noetic act. We are doing something. We are gathering and giving a form, and the form we are in our gestures is the same as the form in our contents. That's the noetic noematic structure.
Thanks.
So in our extended case, we know sets through proof in ZFC, and it rests on the way sets have been introduced to us through stipulation of ZFC. So then one could argue against this description that there has no presentation really happened. After all, stipulating ZFC's axioms doesn't show anything. It's just a text. Nothing comes under any intuition. And that's precisely what our knowledge rule confesses, because in order to say something about sets, we have to prove a theorem inside the formal system. So it seems that we come back to Lutz's statement, there are no sets in set theory. I only claim that such vision is strictly impossible. I think mathematicians, they share a perspective. How they teach mathematics, that's how they do mathematical research. They extend their intuition of collections and membership to a large system of general collections, building supposedly a ZFC universe. I think that nobody can seriously imagine to contest that or to fight against it. So I have big difficulties with any conception of mathematics which rejects this obvious agreement. And I think we have some access to the intentional value of ZFC's stipulation, because mathematicians sometimes they give us drawings showing set theoretic situations, and they give us that as helpful references for ongoing mathematical activity. I think if you discuss with mathematicians, or if you share their work, you are going to have to admit that some contemplation activity accompanies mathematical set theoretical activity. And more can be said because we even receive powers from actions and definitions. We have some powers inside ZFC universe. For example, we know that we have the power set axiom, and because we have the power set axiom, we know that when we have a set E, we are legitimate to introduce the set power of E. And we also know that when we are in a group, we may apply cancellation rule to equations, and so on. So means we don't only project the encompassing universe of sets as framework for mathematical activity, we also inherit from ZFC's text specific powers inside this universe. And these powers proceed from various theoretical statements standing at various levels. I think that if you look at it logically, it will always be a case of existential introduction. When you have an existential statement, you are able to give you a name for an arbitrary object satisfying what exists and what is said to exist. But this existential statement may stand at any level of mathematical complexity. You can at some point introduce a scheme in Grothendieck's sense because of some existential statement, for example. So I mean, it's not limited to the most basic level. Very simple statements or objects configurations. So if you come back to phenomenology, I would say that mathematical correlative objectivity is not only contemplated, like in Husserl, it's also inhabited with actions. And that would be like Merleau-Ponty was seeing phenomenology. Because as you, I don't know if you know that, but Merleau-Ponty was seeing the agent responsible for intentional staging of the world as the body. He was seeing that behind any intentional performance, behind any projection of the world, there is the body and the body's gestures. So he brings back all intentional content to the insertion of body in its world. He takes the body as origin and basis of any subjectivity. So it means that our connection with the universe of sets is not only contemplation, it's also an action, which means that it belongs to Merleau-Ponty's category of being to the world. We explore the universe of sets and we elaborate configurations inside it. And as a matter of fact, we cannot know a ZFC's universe if we don't act inside a ZFC's universe. And we act on the basis of a specific non-sensible body, which is parametered by axioms, definitions, and theorems. So a bit more Merleau-Pontian phenomenology pictures our experience as following unlimited exploratory paths. And these paths, we invent them. So I think theoretical mathematical activity is very much of that kind. We are performing descriptive exploration of the mathematical universe, and it comes with various actions along our paths. We build objects, we analyze derived objects, we achieve computations, and so on. We are doing a lot of things, and that's our exploration of the universe of sets. Well, to bring a kind of genuine pleasure in this picture, I could say that I remember that when I was a young leftist, we were reading theoretical contributions to the revolutionary movement written by the so-called Situate. And they were describing how we live the city. And they said that we live the city through our paths in inside the city. How we live in New York or Los Angeles it cannot be expressed without referring to our past. So in the case of Los Angeles, I think his past would involve the car most of the time. But and they were referring to what would be the revolution. We should live in the city in a way which renews the notion of the city, and they were describing that as I don't know, savagely piercing new paths. So I think Merleau-Pontian intuition is good. I think that's, in a way, that's what people do. People like Woodin, they are doing that. They are renewing the vision of ZFC's universe by savagely piercing new paths.
I just want to point this out because it's so bizarre. So the Situationists had a huge influence on like the early, especially early British punk music scene. So now in my head, I'm trying, which I'm very much, I write on punk when I'm not writing on mathematics sometimes. Because I do some philosophy of art. So now in my head, you've got me looking for connections between like 70s British punk and wooden cardinals. I'm like, okay, these are both situationist ideas. How am I going to connect them?
Yeah.
I just wanted to point that out because it just strikes me as hilarious where my brain was going.
I understand that it's not that obvious, but then with the punk movement, you didn't have this optimistic action vision.
Yeah.
So they were more drinking beer and thinking that the world is finished.
Yeah, definitely the British punks, definitely,
Well, but there is affiliation between these things.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's actually interesting saying that because I grew up maybe in the late 70s, 80s in Germany. Obviously, we only knew some kind of imported punk. Right?
Yeah.
But the way kind of, I don't know, my generation absorbed it was much more optimistic and fun than maybe, like you said, drinking beer, being depressed about the future. That was not how it was kind of absorbed in my culture.
Yeah. And I mean, even the British scene, I mean, a lot of the British punks were just being depressed about Thatcher and drinking beer, but they were often drinking beer in queer clubs, right? So it was, the politics were complicated, right? Whether like a more recent American punk has all sorts of sort of positive leftist activist aspects to it. So we don't need to get too aggressive on punk, but we'll keep that for later.
There are a lot of things to say, and I agree that very often pessimism and optimism are superimposed in people. But I just wanted to insist that it all comes back to Merleau-Ponty.
That's interesting.
Nice.
So if you follow this vision of our original relation to the universe of sets, then sets have been presented. They have been presented in what I call the guise of correlative objectivity by the very stipulation of the ZFC's action. But I have to insist that we should not take this philosophical remark as granting a central role to model theory. It's not about model theory. When we say that U is a ZFC universe, we are speaking outside set theory. We do not mention any model of ZFC. A model of ZFC is a complex object of set theory. It's a structure plus an interpretation. And some properties required for it to be a model involve the linguistic set reality of our theory, because we have to have coded our language in the universe. So the contrast, I think, is clear. S is a model of ZFC, is a statement of ZFC, which accounts for an alleged ZFC fact. And U is a universe satisfying ZFC is an extra mathematical claim. It involves a multiplicity of which we imagine that it fulfills the world form expressed by ZFC's axiomatic text. We could say that U is a universe satisfying ZFC is a metaphysical sentence, but it would be too much because in a way we don't take the assertion totally seriously. U is intended rather than posited, and we behave along its rules, and we aim at the universe and we behave along its rules, but we don't really include the universe in our ontological conception. And we need a universe before speaking of any model. Components of any model have to be drawn from a universe. So the difficulty for contemporary philosophy is that model theory has been very much regarded as the theoretical counterpart of the classical confrontation between discourse and reality. So for us, what stands as at the pole of reality has to be a model, but here we don't do that, because again this principle that we understand reality as models, which is very often in contemporary analytic philosophy, at least, it relates to a correlative universe. So you have to be acquainted with a correlative universe before seeing reality as made of models. So now I'm going to say a bit more about two recent illustrations of what I said about correlative objectivity. And the first one is going to be given by the notion of classifying topos associated to geometric theory. So I have to say a bit more about this notion of classifying topos associated to a geometric theory. First, what is a geometric theory? It's defined as a theory whose axioms have the general form, a universal quantification prefix, followed by an entailment, and both formulas of the entailment are built without universal quantifier. So it means that universal quantification is authorized for axioms only at the top level of an entailment form. So then, because classifying toposes are only considered for geometric theories, it seems to make the whole topic not universal, because it's only works for geometric theories. So here I'm giving you a quotation from Laurent Laforgue. So I want to say a bit more about Laurent Laforgue, both by situating him as a mathematician and by connecting him biographically with me. So first thing, Laurent Laforgue was awarded the Fields Medal, and he was one of the people who remained connected with Grothendieck in the last part of his life. He was having phone calls with him. And second, he was a student in the same high school I was, and I happened to have interrogated him in giving him mathematical exercise of mathematics when he was in his first year after high school. I remember that we were discussing about him with colleagues, and we tried to give him an exercise which would last more than 10 minutes, and we never managed.
It's a nice anecdote. Yeah.
So now he wrote a paper where he speaks about the classifying topos, and he wants mostly to present Caramello's theory and argue in favor of it. But here I'm not going to speak about Caramello's theory. I'm only interested in the very feature of the classifying topos. And he says that it's not really non-universal because, as a matter of fact, we may associate to any first-order theory a geometric theory. It's Morleyization, having the same set theoretical models. So it's not really non-general because we may translate an arbitrary first-order theory into a geometric theory. So on the basis of a geometric theory, we build a classifying topos of it. And this classifying topos is going to generate, in some sense, all the models of our theory, at least seen as models in a topos. So we know first that the notion of model can be repeated or translated into the context of toposes. And it's not surprising at all because any set theoretic construction may be formulated in the context of toposes. So then in that way, we get a category of the models of a theory T in a given topos E. Here, so we would have in particular, if we take the particular case of the topos sets, then we would get the usual models, the category of the usual models. So if M and M prime are two models in the same topos E, a morphism from M to M prime is given by arrows H sub X going from X under M to X under M prime. So for each type, X, because we have variables of various types, our arrow goes from the object associated to X in M to the object associated to X in M prime. So as I said, in the case of if the topos is sets, which means that we are dealing with usual models, then morphism sends to each type of the base sends for each type the base set for this, the base set for this type in the other model. So these arrows H sub X have to satisfy stability conditions. So for example, if relation R at the linguistic level is interpreted in M by a subobject of, x1 up to xn are the types of the variables of our relation R. And then to each of these types is associated an object of the topos, and so in the model, the relation is translated by a subobject of the product of these types, these associated types. So we can, so you see, we have this commuting diagram, which is not exactly a commuting diagram, because what we say is that the interpretation of R in the model M prime has to be determined by the composition of iota sub M composed with the product of the applications H sub X1 until H sub Xn. So if you look at, in the case of the set theoretical context, it simply means that objects related by the set theoretical relation interpreting R should be sent to objects related by the new interpretation of R. If I have a morphism between two models. Then we define interpretations of function symbols and of individual constants as they should be, and we submit them to similar stability conditions. So in that way, we reach a category of the models of T, of the theory T in the topos E. Now I come to the classifying property and the universal model. So what is asserted? We may prove the existence of given a geometric theory T, we may prove the existence of a topos B, such that for every co-complete topos E, there is an equivalence of between the morphism between E and B, because and here we have toposes, so the morphisms are geometric morphisms. And on the right side, it's the category of the models of T in E. So we have an equivalence between both categories. And this it means that to have a model of T in E is exactly the same as having a geometric morphism from E to B. And that's the sense in which this classifying topos is classifying. When we say that it's classifying, we mean exactly that. That we have something pinpointing any model.
Representing theory inside the category of toposes.
Yeah.
Represent. Represent.
Yeah.
So what this immediately yields a privileged model because we can apply the equivalence we wrote to the case of where the topos E is exactly the classifying topos B. So in that case, we have morphism from B to B is equivalent to models of T in B. And we may choose as a particular geometric morphism the couple of the identities of B. It is a geometric morphism. So in that case, we get a specific universal model, notation U sub T, of T in B. So our universal model is a model in the classifying topos. And we prove that this universal model has a universal property because any formula of the type for all x, phi of x entails C of x, where phi and psi are geometric formulas, is true in U sub T if and only if it is true in every model defined in any topos. So in a way, this universal model controls the truth in any top for every model in any topos. So does this mean that this construction of the classifying topos, does this mean that what I have called correlation, you remember that the stipulation of ZFC motivates our aiming at a universe of sets? So does it mean that correlation is going to be revisited? So I'm reading Laurent Laforgue again, and look at what he's writing. The move from the syntactic side to its associated topos formalizes the move from any mathematical first-order theory, from the axioms which define the theory and whose combination makes up the proofs of the theorems, to the objects under study upon which the theorems bear. Otherwise said, it formalizes the move from a formal language coming under the jurisdiction of logic to a properly mathematical content this language may express. Otherwise said again, any mathematician studying mathematical objects, first order, and proving theory properties of those objects on the basis of their defined forms, plays most of the time, most often without knowing so, a back and forth game between a site and the topos defines. So you see that in this quotation, Laurent Laforgue understands the construction of the classifying topos as a way to performing the transition from the syntactic level to the mathematical objects level. So that's exactly what I have called correlation. So he seems to, when I read the quotation, I have the feeling that he speaks about what I call correlative objectivity. He seems to describe the move from syntax to correlative word as mathematically given or mathematically translated by the theory of the classifying topos. Then I'm going to ask the question, can we really believe that the construction of the classifying topos is the exact mathematical version of what I had in mind speaking about correlative objectivity? So in Lafog's picture, the working mathematicians plays a back and forth game between syntactic level of the formal language and topos providing words. He doesn't mention the syntactic level as such, but he rather mentions the site built on the basis of the syntax. Yes,
I have two questions.
go on.
One is connecting a theory, say ZFC, with its Booleanization, and whether a standard mathematician do that automatically, because you need that in order to work with the classifying topos.
If you want to have a classifying topos of ZFC.
No. Well, for instance, yes,
yes,
but I mean, take any theory, yes.
Yes, but I'm asking a more general question. I want to know if this construction of the classifying topos is a way of getting to what I call the correlated.
Yeah, but for instance, for a theory like that, there could be a problem because, well, at least assuming that.
You have my second paragraph, because if you are doing that way, you are looking for a model.
No, I'm sorry. I'm just thinking of the standard mathematician that does this without knowing.
Yeah.
That's my point.
Yeah. Well, that's the description. I think I don't know what to understand in Lafog's description.
Oh, okay.
But I understand that. Maybe...
In fact, I just have questions, because the second question is then in general, and I would suspect certainly in the classifying topos for ZFC moralized, the logic is not standard classical logic, which means also that the standard mathematician, in a sense, works within some kind of intuitionistic logic without knowing it, and very oftenly despising it because they think that intuitionistic logic is not.
I understand. You're right on both points. And I think when I was reading Lafog, I thought that he says, in the context of classifying topos theory, almost the same as a lot of commentators say. They say that when you are working in an axiomatic theory, the mathematician is indeed is as a matter of fact working in an arbitrary model.
Okay.
That's how he interprets proving theorems. So, and I think Lafog says as much, but he tries to transpose that with classifying topos. So he thinks that the mathematician works formally, so he proves theorems, but he thinks that he is inhabiting something. And this something would be given by the classifying topos.
Okay.
That's how I understand him.
Okay.
So now we have reached the time close to finish.
So I just wanted to
say, I'm sorry.
I mean, I understand obviously why you work with classifying topos is because you want to have first order logic. But one could also make an example where you just use free algebras and equational logic, which would kind of make the math of much easier.
You free algebras, I heard.
Yeah, so when we have equational logic, right? So we use equational logic to talk about algebras. And then every equational theory.
I didn't hear what the logic you were.
Equational logic.
Equational logic,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You use that to describe algebras?
Yeah. So this is like first order theories and models. And then for every equation in theory, there's a free algebra, which is kind of a universal model.
Okay.
And it plays exactly the same role as the classifying topos.
Okay.
But it's
It's easier.
it requires much less machinery to
I
explain.
understand. Yes, because there is a, I followed the book of Murdyke and MacLean, and at some slide later, I say that it's extremely complicated, and the whole book is written in order to justify the classifying topos theorem.
Yeah.
So, because of
okay. Good time.
because of Athenaeum, we have to stop. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
That was great.
So they're going to have lunch at the faculty lounge, which I'm sure.
I actually already ate before I
Okay.
came here because I
Okay.
knew I wanted to get into an office and
Sure,
slides before
sure.
the talk.
So there, I mean, places to hang out here. I could take you to Marco's office.
And whatever is easiest. I just need a place to sit my computer. It's safe.
Yeah. Well, why not Marco's office? It's just a short walk. Then I'll give you my card so you can get in and out. I won't need
Thank you very much, because it's the first time I see. And
I
see
thought of you when preparing it. It was good for you.
it's.
Thank you.
I like your point about Laforgue's vision.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I do think that I asked the questions because I think the questions are there.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer, and I hope that
I love the questions.
yeah. I'm going to the other.
Yes, you have.
I'll see you later.
You have your session now.
Yes.
Do you go for lunch now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm a meeting person.
Yeah, sometimes it's